An Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn al-Salah al-Shahrazuri. Part 1. Author's Introduction. Our Lord, give us mercy from you and grant us guidance in our affair. Praise, the most complete and highest praise, be to God, the guide for those who seek his guidance, the guardian of those who fear him, and the one who suffices those who seek his approval. The most perfect prayers and blessings on our Prophet, the other prophets, and the family of each, so long as someone asks for his forgiveness and invokes his mercy. Ameen, Ameen. The Science of Hadith. The Science of Hadith is one of the best of the excellent sciences and one of the most beneficial of the useful disciplines. Manly and virile men, that is, thorough and complete scholars, love it, and the only people who dislike it are the contemptible and base. It is one of the sciences with the greatest relevance to the various other sciences, especially applied law, fiqh, which is the central science. For that reason, the errors of those writers on applied law who are unfamiliar with the sciences of hadith are numerous, and imperfections in the remarks of those scholars who forsake it are plain. Formerly, the stature of hadith was exalted. The throngs of hadith students were massive, and the capabilities of the experts in the discipline and the transmitters of hadith were high. Through their living, the different sciences of hadith were made vital. Through their continued existence, the branches of the various sub-disciplines of hadith were kept fresh, and the abodes of hadith were occupied by its students. These students and experts have now died off, and the sciences of hadith have been obliterated to such an extent that the practitioners in hadith are a tiny band, few and weak in number. For the most part, in taking up hadith, they are concerned with nothing more than hearing them heedlessly, and in recording hadith they do not expend more effort than to write them down defectively. They toss aside the various sciences of hadith, through which the stature of hadith became exalted, and they have made themselves remote from the bodies of knowledge which made it magnificent. Just when someone examining a difficulty in the science of hadith could hardly find anyone capable of explaining it, and someone who wanted to pursue the science of hadith could hardly come across anyone knowledgeable in it, generous God, he is blessed and exalted, and deserves all praise, bestowed a blessing in the form of a book, Kitab Ma'rifat Anwa' Ilm al-Hadith, knowledge of the categories of the science of hadith. This book divulged the hidden secrets of the science of hadith, explained its stubborn difficulties, made firm its joints, set down its rules, illuminated its lineaments, clarified its rulings, detailed its subcategories, and shed light on its principles. It elucidated its branches and subsections, brought together its various sciences and benefits, and tracked down its stray and valuable points. I beseech, entreat, and humbly pray to God, the Great, in whose hands lie harm and benefit, and granting and forbidding, seeking his favour by every means, and requesting his intercession in every way, that he make this book replete in that regard, and more replete, and that he make it ample for all that, and more ample, and that he make it reward and a benefit of it in great in this world and in the next. God is near, and he answers our prayers. I will have no success without God. Upon him I rely, and to him I turn repentantly. This is the list of the categories of hadith. 1. Sound hadith. 2. Fair hadith. 3. Weak hadith. 4. Supported hadith. 5. Uninterrupted hadith. 6. Raised hadith. 7. Halted hadith. 8. Cut off hadith, and they are different from interrupted hadith. 9. Loose hadith. 10. Interrupted hadith. 11. Problematic hadith, and this is followed by the discussion of some subsidiary issues, including the isnad containing the word an, from the suspension of hadith. 12. Misrepresentation and the treatment of misrepresented hadith. 13. Anomalous hadith. 14. Unfamiliar hadith. 15. Analysis, parallelisms, and attestations. 16. Additions of reliable transmitters and the treatment of them. 17. Isolated hadith. 18. Defective hadith. 19. Disrupted hadith. 20. Material interpolated into hadith. 21. Forged hadith. 22. Mixed up hadith. 23. The characteristic of those whose transmission is accepted and those whose transmission is rejected. 24. The methods of hearing and receiving hadith, and this chapter includes an exposition on the forms of licensing and their treatment, as well as the rest of the ways of taking up and receiving hadith. It contains much information. 25. The writing of hadith and the means of fixing and recording texts, and this chapter contains excellent and important information. 26. The manner of relating hadith, the stipulation regarding the conveyance of them and related matters, and this chapter contains many of the valuable points of this science. 27. Guidelines for the transmitter of hadith. 28. Guidelines for the student of hadith. 29. Elevated and low isnads. 30. Famous hadith. 31. Rare and scarce hadith. 32. Rare words in the hadith. 33. Enchained hadith. 34. Abrogating and abrogated hadith. 35. Misreadings in the isnad and texts of hadith. 36. Contradictory hadith. 37. Additions to cohesive isnads. 38. Hadith with hidden looseness. 39. The companions. 40. The followers. 41. Older people transmitting from younger ones. 42. Symmetrical transmissions and other instances of peers transmitting from one another. 43. Brothers and sisters among scholars and transmitters. 44. The transmissions by fathers from their sons. 45. The opposite of that, that is the transmission by sons from their fathers. 46. Those from whom two transmitters related, one early and one late, with a great difference between their date of death. 47. Those from whom a single transmitter related hadith. 48. Those who are referred to by different names or varying epithets. 49. Unique names of the companions, transmitters of hadith and other scholars. 50. Names and paidonymics. Paidonym is kuna, or a agnatic title, kunya. 51. Paidonymics of those better known under their name rather than their paidonymic. So someone is known better as, instead of Abu someone, they're known as Abdullah or Abdurrahman or John or Ahmed or whatever. 52. Nicknames of transmitters of hadith. 53. Homographic names and gentilics. 54. Homonymic names and gentilics. 55. The category composed of the two previous categories. 56. Transmitters resembling one another in name and lineage who are distinguished by the relative position of the names of the son and the father. 57. Those whose lineage refers to someone other than their father. 58. Gentilics, the actual significance of which differs from the apparent one. 59. Obscure references. 60. The dates of transmitters, including their death date and other relevant dates. 61. Reliable and weak transmitters of hadith. 62. Reliable transmitters who confuse their hadith at the end of their life. 63. The generations of transmitters and scholars. 64. Transmitters of hadith and other scholars who are clients. 65. The residences and lands of transmitters. This is the last of the categories, but it is not the last of what is possible in this regard. The science of hadith can be divided into countless categories, since the states and characteristics of hadith transmitters and their states and characteristics of hadith texts are endless. Every one of these states and characteristics deserves to be mentioned separately and requires its own specialists, for each is a category in its own right. But that would be an endless task. God is enough for us and an excellent protector. Stay tuned.